if there's one thing that the Titans machines from Advance of Zeta are known for, it's compatibility.
All of this just works.
No matter what equipment that the Titans test team were testing out, there was always some way to get them to work on these seemingly wildly different machines that the Titans were using. And in their latest installments, they decided to push this compatibility even further. And the machine used in many of these examples is the Hazel Kelderek, a next-generation prototype that was used for testing out a lot of experimental parts. But today, you're going to be seeing it with a lot of old parts. But first up, we get a quick history lesson to show us that compatibility was taken into consideration all the way from the beginning by the Federation. One of their first mobile suits was the legendary RX-78-2 Gundam, a high-performance and equally expensive monster of a mobile suit, which was then later simplified to become the mass-production RGM-79 GIM. But despite being simplified, key systems did remain the same, or at least were designed with compatibility in mind. For example, whereas the RX-78-2 used a complex core fighter as a cockpit, the GIM used a simple but similarly sized core block as a cockpit. As a result, the GIM still had access to all of the weapons and other equipment that were designed for the Gundam. And the same would be true with the GIM Quell. While it did come from a slightly different branch of the family, it would still have many of the same standards that were introduced by the RX-78-2, which would then be carried over to its developments, being the Gundam TR-1 Hazel and the RX-122 Hazel Kelderek. And because of this, the Kelderek was even compatible with things like the G-Fighter, the Schrodinger's cat of the Universal Century, because it's in a weird limbo between canon and non-canon. And here it makes another appearance, 2 even. But as interesting as it would be to see the Kelderek going into battle as EG armor, or with any of the other equipment that we'll be covering in a second, it needs to be said that not all of this equipment was necessarily meant for combat purposes with the Kelderek. One of its main goals was to gather data for the Titans' ultimate machine, the TRS. Which then also explains why we see the Kelderek's top half mounted on the gun tank's bottom half, to gather data that was obviously vital for the development of the TRS. But we also see some equipment listed here that could actually still come in very handy. First on the left, we have the Fellow Booster that was famously used by the GIM Intercept Custom. Like the name indicates, this is a booster unit for space that is also outfitted with 6 missile launchers. And it's one of those pieces of equipment that, if you have it lying around anyways, you might as well use it. Like, I could totally see the Kelderek using this in actual combat, or a squadron of GIM Quells whose main goal is to quickly intercept enemies. And we just got confirmation that this should work. And the same thing goes for the light liner in the middle. This was an early subflight system developed for the Federation's mobile suits during the One-Year War, and since we've seen it used by vanilla GIMs, a GIM Striker, and even a gun cannon mass production type, it shouldn't come as much of a surprise that the Kelderek was also able to use it. What I'm more surprised by is that there's no mention of the Corvette Booster, a subflight system that we even saw appearing in Gundam Thunderbolt. But moving on to the chunkiest example that we got, the backpack of the heavy full armor 7th Gundam. It comes packing with a long-range beam cannon, 2 regular cannons, micro-missile launchers, and some heavy-duty thrusters and extra fuel tanks to offset all of that added weight. Sometimes people wonder what happened to experimental units after the story ended. And well, for anything Federation related from the One-Year War, I think the answer is that they're stored away in a Titan's hangar for further testing. Something that I really wasn't expecting then was the core booster. Apparently, the cockpit of the Primrose can be mounted on the jet core booster. I'm not sure what they're gonna do with this information, but at least now we know that it is a possibility. And the final thing in this category is the G-Dash, a very obscure attachment for the RX-78-2 that first appeared in the Gundam Tactics Mobility Fleet 0079 computer game. In this configuration, the body of the RX-78-2 is mounted on what is essentially a heavy space fighter, which is outfitted with 2 beam cannons. The original version does look horrible, but the redesign by Takayuki Yanase is a huge upgrade. Unfortunately, Advance of Zeta went with the original, which we now know is compatible with the Kelderek, and as a result, with other machines like the Jim Quell as well. Next up then, we have the big update, the backpack compatibility. One of the main pillars of the Titans' amazing compatibility was the Transpack system. By using a universal connection, it meant that any of their mobile suits, beginning with the Jim Quell, could use any other backpack, and this continued all the way up to the Barzam. Some of the examples given here are the Cannon backpack, which was used by a variety of machines, the backpacks of the Hyzak, Jim Quell, Marasai, Gundam Mark II, Ewagzak, Barzam, and even the TR series, which itself could also mount a variety of different boost pods, like the single shield boost pod, the twin shield boost pod, or the tri-booster boost pod. And we also have this one very Advance of Zeta-esque backpack that I couldn't immediately identify, so either it's slipping my mind or we're gonna see this thing appearing in future installments with more backstory. But what if all of those backpacks just weren't enough choice? What if you really needed to use the container backpack that was used by the ground Gundams? Like, I know you're out there. And well, in that case, there was the grapple arm, a connector piece that could be hooked up to a Transpack compatible mobile suit, and pretty much any Jim or Gundam-esque backpack from the 1 Year War. So let's go over that list, shall we? We have the backpack of the RX-78 Gundams, the full armor Gundam, the heavy Gundam, the Gundam high mobility type, the Mudrock Gundam, the full armor 7th Gundam, the ground Gundam, Gundams Unit 4 and 5, the Pale Rider D2, the G-Line standard armor with Gatling Smashers, the Jim Sniper 2, the Jim Striker, and even the Aqua Jim, because why not? And all of this worked for both the standard Kelderek and the Kelderek Ozla. As we can see in the given examples, for the standard Kelderek, it was as simple as just hooking up the grappling arm to the back of the Kelderek, but for the Kelderek Ozla, there was an additional piece required, an extra arm called the bellows frame, named so because it could extend and collapse very much like a bellows. So, you had the old backpack, which was connected to the grapple arm, which was then connected to the bellows frame, which then finally attached the entire assembly to the back of the Kelderek Ozla. And it specifically connected this to the Ozla parts of the Kelderek, meaning that the Ozla parts in their Primrose form could also use all of these new backpacks, with the example given here being the backpack of the G-Line assault armor with the Gatling Smashers equipped, a configuration that turned it into a medium support fighter. And based on the text, it sounds like this idea of using older backpacks with the grapple arm could have actually been considered for real-life combat as well. During the 1 Year War, a lot of mobile suits, and as a result, a lot of backpacks were mass-produced. And they were now just kinda hanging around in hangars. So if you're lamenting this happening, then the next obvious step is to use those backpacks. Now, I don't think there's much point in jumping through a lot of hoops to give your brand new mobile suit a basic RX-78-2 backpack, even though that is one of the examples that were given. Like, it's a great proof of concept and for gathering data, but you're not going to be implementing this on a large scale. But we definitely have some other options that offer a big enough advantage over, for example, something like the standard Jim Quell backpack and the standard Kelderek backpack that would justify this system. Think, for example, the Mudrock's backpack for more firepower, or the Gundam High Mobility type's backpack for better mobility in space, which is the other example that we're given. And finally, we go back to the Primrose, the little fighter craft that can dock with machines like the Hazel to turn it into the Hazel Ozla, and the Kelderek to turn it into the Kelderek Ozla. But this thing also had a few more tricks up its sleeve. In order to increase the survivability of the Titans' elite pilots, the Primrose could also act as an emergency escape pod with some extra weapons to boot. Again, because the backpack was hooked up to the Primrose, it could use those weapons, and through an extra bellows frame mounted on the nose, it could also hold onto handheld weaponry. Plus, because the bellows frame could transfer power and control inputs, it could even fire those weapons, much like a simplified mobile suit arm. These bellows frames could also be attached to other parts of the mobile suit and would later on become an integral part of the TR6 series. But here, the bellows frame could do even more thanks to the Advanced Bunny's operating system. Which then neatly brings us to the conclusion of this video. The Kelderek would be used extensively for testing, and no matter how silly some of the configurations might have looked, they would provide valuable information for future mobile suits and future mobile suit attachments. I already mentioned the TRS and the TR6 series, but data gathered from the Kelderek would also be used for equipment like the Fruitadoo and the Fruitadoo 2. And finally then, a configuration that is prominently shown on the pages, but not really discussed, is the Kelderek Ozla with 2 hip-mounted missile launchers and a Mark II-esque backpack with an extra canister on which 4 missiles are mounted. A configuration that is of course very reminiscent of the Gym 3. And I believe that that backpack could just be a standard Mark II backpack, and that the canister is using the same type of connection as the G Defensor. But I'm sure that we'll get more information about this thing at a later date. And when we do, I'll be sure to let you know about it. So as always, a big thank you to the Patreon supporters. I hope everyone watching has a great day, and I'll see you all next time.